speaking of shaming.
Speaking of shaming.
I mean, our front page, of course, the meltdown at NBC News over the 48-hour hiring and firing of former RNC chairwoman of...
Like 5 days, not even a half a Scaramucci.
Ronna Romney McDaniel as a correspondent.
Or a contributor.
Excuse me. A contributor at a reported salary of $300,000 a year.
So should we begin with listening to Chuck Todd's moment of righteous indignation?
Let's say first that this was announced in a note to NBC on last Friday. And then McDaniel was a guest on Meet the Press on Sunday, where she was interviewed by Kristen Welker, the host of Meet the Press.
Chuck Todd's replacement.
And then it was followed by a panel on which Chuck Todd was a guest, and he had this to say.
Let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation, because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. Well, I have no idea whether any answer she gave to you was because she didn't want to mess up her contract. She wants us to believe that she was speaking for the RNC when the RNC was paying for her. So she has credibility issues that she still has to deal with.
Yeah.
Is she speaking for herself, or is she speaking on behalf of who's paying her? Once at the RNC, she did say that, hey, I'm speaking for the party. I get that. That's part of the job. So what about here?
Todd's complaint was that Romney McDaniel had suborned Donald Trump's lies about the election and had soft-soaped the claims about January 6th being an inside job or whatever, that she had mouthed or looked the other way on these claims. But then when Welker asked her about these things, she said, no, I think that that's wrong, and I think they should be punished for it. And then asked why, she said, well, because that's what your job is when
She said you got to take one for the team.
Yeah, that's what your job is.
I have a couple of thoughts on this, and I'm curious what you think. The first is that surely if NBC News, which hired Ronna Romney McDaniels, and ABC News, I believe, has Reince Priebus on the payroll.
Okay.
It's frustrating to me as somebody on the right that these are the go-to spokesmen for the right. My first thought was surely they could have found a more articulate, better spokeswoman for the cause than she.
Right.
And that part is frustrating to me. And part of me wonders, do they look for people who are not the most articulate spokesman for the cause? And the other part of it is, of course, Chuck Todd opened the floodgates and all of these people came out.
The whole MSNBC universe, Joe Scarborough, by the way, who was hired in exactly the same fashion that Ronna Romney McDaniel was when he was a former Republican congressman, Gingrich revolutionary congressman from Florida, was hired in exactly the same manner, trying to add Republican voices at NBC. He got up on his hind legs and Rachel Maddow, and it was I think it was in Playbook. I'm sorry if I'm mistaken about this, but at one point there was even a catalog of who on MSNBC has spoken out about it and who has not. And then it listed too. It was like Lawrence O'Donnell and so. Over to you. Like, okay, this is the signal now for everyone to
pile on.
Now, some useful backstory here.
Can I?
You can do anything
before
you
do
want.
The backstory. The most insane one of these was definitely, and we have to play the clip of Nicole Wallace saying, "How could NBC turn over our sacred airwaves and give her? She's now a card-carrying member of the NBC family." And oh my gosh, I mean.
And who's Nicole Wallace?
Nicole Wallace, the former Bush administration spokeswoman. I mean, the arrogant self-regard is so nauseating. Give me a break.
Here it is.
What we've also said to election deniers is not just they can do that on our airwaves, but that they can do that as one of us, as badge-carrying employees of NBC News, as paid contributors to our sacred airwaves.
Okay, so what Nicole Wallace is saying is the same thing Joe Scarborough is saying, which is it's fine to hire Republicans. They just can't be too Republican-y. It's fine to hire Republicans, but they can't support Republicans. And the backstory here that I find interesting, when MSNBC hired Jen Psaki, a very similar kind of hire, right? When MSNBC hired Jen Psaki, here was the headline on a CNN piece: NBC News journalist vexed by MSNBC's move to hire White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. And the journalists at NBC tutted MSNBC for hiring a mouthpiece for Noah Oppenheim, the NBC News president, even held an impromptu phone call so that he could address the matter with vexed staffers at the Washington Bureau, some of whom have complained to their superiors that tentative hiring tarnishes the NBC News brand.
And by the way, she has a show, a primetime show.
But so part of this is driven by office politics, internal dynamics. So NBC News looks down its nose at MSNBC for understandable reasons, right? NBC News is a impressive global. It's America's leading television news. Lester Holt is.
Okay, Nicole.
No, I'm saying NBC News looks at MSNBC askance for a reason, right? Because MSNBC is intensely and intentionally partisan and blah, 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 blah. So this was a chance for MSNBC to pay back NBC News, right? Like, oh, are we allowed to publicly voice our vexation with the other part of our corporate siblings' misconduct in hiring? Oh, okay, well, we can do this. And then, of course, they loved it so much. Once they got to start doing it, they loved it so much because it was a chance for everybody to demonstrate to their audience, and this is a great example of how audience capture works. MSNBC, it felt so good to get to say to their loyal viewers, we would never tolerate this. We'll never have this. We'll never allow it. And it felt so good, so they all just took a turn doing it. And I saw here the same thing that we saw at the New York Times, that we've seen at the Washington Post, and that we've seen at a lot of other places. I would not have hired Ronna Romney McDaniel, right? If I was the head of NBC News, I wouldn't have hired her simply for the fact that what do you get, right? She's not having a person.
You're making my point. She's not good.
Having a person, you can hire contributors for access, which is kind of icky but understandable. But she doesn't have access because she's been banished and exiled by the Trump people. Or you can hire them. You know who I love? Claire McCaskill. You know why I love Claire McCaskill? She's a former Democratic senator, and she has interesting stuff to say when she comes on television. She goes on MSNBC. I don't agree with her all the time, but she has interesting stuff to say. At News Nation, I love Mick Mulvaney. You know why I love Mick Mulvaney? He worked in the Trump White House. He worked in the Trump administration. He was in Congress, but he's an interesting analyst with all of this experience. Paying someone, here's how I will put it. Paying someone to be a reliable mouthpiece for a political party is not a good use of money. Just book people from the party, right? You don't need to hire the former. You can just book the person from the party to come on and tell you what the party line is. So I wouldn't have hired her. I get it. But neither would I have engaged in the kind of solipsistic, self-seeking, glory-hogging, ball-hogging, preposterous behavior that these people in MSNBC did. If you have a complaint about the way that, and it's not even your company, right? The way that somebody in another division of your company is operating, there are ways to do it and there are ways not to do it, and this was juvenile beyond juvenile.
Well, I don't totally agree with your point about MSNBC tutting NBC, in that Chuck Todd of NBC, who has his own issues with MSNBC, led the charge in all of this.
Well, that's what made it sad.
And
invited back on the show that you got fired from to come on the panel and say, and to try to white knight it, is a little rich. And my thing for Todd is doing that. The people who drove him out of his job, right? The activated, very online left that believed that Chuck Todd was a stalking horse for MAGA America or something. I don't think they're going to warm up to him. I don't think that him having done this, they're going to say, now we like Chuck Todd.
And beyond that, so MSNBC and NBC were united in their objection to having Ronna Romney McDaniel on. And then they're all saying, it's not that we object to Republicans, it's that we object to Ronna Romney McDaniel because she was towing the Trump line on all of this. Well, hello, guys. You know, the Republican Party is the Trump party. And to the extent you want a faithful representative of the current Republican Party on your airwaves, they are going to be doing this. Exactly. And so I had a very interesting conversation with somebody last night, another a well-known journalist, who said, you know, I do think they had to draw a line, and this is beyond the pale. And I think that is a debate you can have. But to the extent you want an actual representative of where the party is and you want to expose viewers to that, you're going to have to expose them to people who are going to agree with Trump when he says things that are beyond the pale.
Right.
And have that debate.
The semaphore piece, the conflict over McDaniel threatens to reverse some of the gains that top network figures believed it had made to establish some credibility with members of the Republican Party. NBC lobbied hard behind the scenes for a GOP primary debate, dispatching anchor Lester Holt to meet with the RNC as part of the network's pitch. It worked. NBC was the first non-Fox outlet to secure a debate. And throughout the GOP presidential primary, the television news organization and its digital counterpart broke a number of major stories about the contest. And I guess what I would say is I can tell you that there are real consequences for displeasing your network's audience, right? I've been to the fair and I have seen the elephant. And this, I guess my point here, most of all, is this was just handled impossibly badly. This was just from start to finish handled impossibly badly. And it also it also speaks to the fact that trying to find, I feel the pain. Finding Republicans who are, as you say, in step with Donald Trump, but not.
And that means in step with the party, basically.
That are in step with the party. So there's a bunch of Republicans who are trying to occupy the same space that Romney McDaniel failed to occupy, which is we're just waiting till it's over, right? So there are these like Mitch McConnell is out, Ronna Romney McDaniel is out, the Kevin McCarthy is out. All of those people who were like, we're just going to hold the line and stay Republican until the fever breaks. That's over. And the people who, if you want voices who are really in step with where the party is today, you have like Donald Trump's daughter-in-law. You have like that's where you have to go if you want to have those voices. But then these outlets struggle with this thing. If you hire people like that, what are you going to do? Argue with them? Right. So if you have on a person who will faithfully repeat Donald Trump, even when Donald Trump's lying, then, and you pay them. So I hired you. Now I'm going to argue with you. You were colleagues, but now we're going to fight. And, you know, if you look at how Fox tries to navigate the space of having Democrats on shows, you get Harold Ford, you get Jessica Tarlaw. Jessica does a great job. Right, she does a hard job in a difficult space, and does well at it. But as you know, Juan Williams, I can say the same thing about Juan. But finding people who are authentically of a point of view, who are not self-loathing Republicans. MSNBC excels at finding self-loathing Republicans. Right, the Jen Rubin effect. Oh, we're going to have now. Even Republicans say this is terrible. Finding people who authentically believe the things that they believe and stand up for them, but not having it just be hippie punching is hard.